Maria, since she was young, was always a kind-hearted girl full of compassion. Born into a noble family, surrounded by wealth, she seemed destined for a life of comfort and privilege. Her days were bathed in the golden light that gleamed in the palace, where her name was synonymous with delicacy and purity. Every person who crossed her path was touched by her kindness and her smile. She was not just beautiful, there was something special about her heart, something that made her goodness shine like the sun, illuminating even the darkest corners of the kingdom. But Maria's fate, like that of many women of that time, was not in her own hands. Very young, she was promised in marriage to the heir of the throne, a much older and cruel man, chosen for reasons that had nothing to do with love. Maria, still innocent of the power games and palace intrigues, accepted her future with resignation. She believed that, perhaps, over time, love would bloom in her heart, even if the marriage was merely an alliance between fortunes. The years passed, but the palace, once a place of beauty and hope, became a prison. Her husband, now king, grew increasingly frustrated, especially as Maria's womb remained barren. To him, her inability to produce an heir was a flaw that needed to be punished, and he did not hesitate to take out his frustrations on her. What was once a place of luxury and admiration became a dark and suffering-filled environment. Every hallway Maria walked through seemed narrower, every room colder. Yet, Maria never allowed her spirit to be completely broken. She found a way to keep her kindness alive, even in the face of such pain. Over time, she began to leave the palace in disguise, wearing simple clothes, far from the curious gazes of the court. She would walk to nearby villages, where she helped the poorest with food, medicine, and words of comfort. In those moments, Maria was no longer a queen. She was just a common woman, a woman of the people, who shared in the pain and needs of those who needed her most. This transformation of Maria did not happen overnight. It was a slow, almost invisible process, but one that changed how she viewed the world and herself. She was no longer that delicate young noblewoman, whom everyone knew as the little princess, and instead, she began to identify with the humble people. The woman who once walked on silk carpets now felt the earth beneath her bare feet. The gold that once gleamed around her no longer had value for her. What truly mattered was the good she could do with her own hands. As her popularity among the people grew, the king's hatred also increased. He could not accept that his wife was more loved by the subjects than he was. This anger consumed him, and the aggressions became more frequent. But no matter how much her body was marked by pain, Maria's heart continued to shine with the same kindness as before. She had become something more than a queen. Maria Mulambo was now a woman of the people, and her strength came from simplicity and love for those in need. This transition is what defines Maria Mulambo. It wasn't the suffering that made her give up, but her ability to find beauty and meaning in the simple life. She became a woman who, even amidst adversity, never lost the essence of who she truly was, a generous soul, a protector of the humble. And so, Maria, who was once a young noblewoman with a kind heart, found her true identity among the people, marked by sacrifice, but strengthened by the compassion and love she nurtured for others. This transformation, from princess to woman of the people, immortalized Maria as a symbol of resilience and the power of selfless love. Even living in a golden palace, surrounded by luxuries most people could only dream of, Maria felt a deep emptiness in her heart. The constant abuse and cruelty of her husband made her question her role in this life of appearances. The kingdom saw her as the queen who couldn't provide an heir to the throne, and the sharp tongues of the court blamed her for this failure, as if that was her only purpose. Each day inside the palace became more unbearable, and the shine of the opulent halls couldn't erase the darkness Maria carried within. It was in the midst of this pain that Maria found her true calling. Instead of closing herself off in her suffering, she turned toward something greater, caring for the needy. Those secret visits to the nearby villages, at first timid, became a refuge for her soul. As her feet touched the dry soil and her hands met those of people living in misery, Maria felt a deep connection, as if she had finally found where she truly belonged. Every smile she managed to bring to a hungry child's face, every grateful glance from a desperate mother, seemed to ease a bit of the burden she carried. Even in the simple clothes she wore to disguise her royalty, Maria was recognized for her noble posture and her aura of kindness. She never arrived empty-handed. She brought food, medicine, and, perhaps most importantly, hope. Hope that, despite her own pain, there was something deeper and truer in life, the ability to transform the world through small acts of love. Each time Maria left the palace in secret, it was as if she left a piece of her sadness behind. The weight of the abuse and loneliness she felt beside her cruel husband didn't disappear, but it was eased by the spiritual strength she found in her actions. The simple gesture of giving a piece of bread to a starving child, or sitting beside a sick mother, sharing stories and laughter, fed her spirit in a way the palace's riches never could. The people in the villages didn't know that the woman who offered them help was, in fact, the queen of the realm. To them, Maria was simply the kind woman, someone who, even dressed in common clothes, had a light that couldn't be ignored. Those moments away from the court were her sanctuary, and she began to realize that her true strength didn't come from her title or position as queen, but from her ability to care, to extend a hand to those in need, even as her own life was falling apart. With each act of charity, Maria reaffirmed her innate kindness. Instead of letting suffering harden her, she transformed her pain into fuel to help even more people. While her husband sank deeper into jealousy and rage, Maria grew stronger, more determined. Her compassion was the weapon she wielded against the abuse, and her kindness was her armor. Even when her eyes were filled with inner tears, her smile remained constant for those who depended on her. These acts of charity were not just about giving what she had, they were about giving of herself. Maria understood the true nature of sacrifice and empathy. She knew that, although she couldn't change her own situation, she could improve the lives of others. And by doing so, she found an inner peace that even the grandest palaces could not offer her. Thus, in the midst of suffering, Maria found comfort in kindness, reaffirming her spiritual strength. She had become a figure of unconditional love, and this strength, this gift of helping others even when her own heart was broken, was what immortalized her. She no longer needed titles, jewels, or thrones. Her true royalty lay in her spirit and the impact she had on the lives she touched. The news reached the king like a thunderclap before a storm. Maria was pregnant. The entire kingdom whispered, but those murmurs were not as loud as the ones in the king's mind. He, who for so many years had been unable to produce an heir, was suddenly faced with an unbearable truth: the child Maria carried was not his. His rage consumed him like a fire that could not be extinguished. Every look he received, every word exchanged by the servants, every gesture in his direction felt like a screaming reminder of his impotence. The king, who had spent his life building an image of absolute power and control, now found himself humiliated in a way his vanity could never bear. How could he, the sovereign king, accept that his wife's womb harbored the seed of another man? His fury rose through his body like an uncontrolled flame, burning away any remnant of reason. Inside the palace walls, the environment had already become unbearable for Maria, but now, with every step she took, she felt the weight of watchful eyes. The servants whispered in the shadows, while the king, consumed by shame, became more cruel and unpredictable. He confronted her with venomous words, insinuating that she had tarnished the royal name. But Maria, carrying within her not only the life of her child, but also the hope of a different future, resisted with a strength that came from within. She knew that her pregnancy was a miracle of love, proof that, even amidst the pain, life could still bloom. Yet the king, blinded by rage and humiliation, could not see the miracle. To him, it was all a personal insult, an affront to his pride. Every movement of Maria seemed to remind him of his failure, his inability. The news spread throughout the kingdom, and the king retreated further into his madness, more and more obsessed with erasing this stain on his honor. He could not allow the people to know the truth. He could not let the child be born. It was on a moonless night that Maria's fate was sealed. As she slept in her chambers, dreaming of the future she would have with her child and her beloved, the king, in a desperate act, ordered his guards to capture her. There was no trial, no questions. Just one cold command, sharp as a blade: make her disappear. The guards dragged her down the palace stairs, and Maria, in the midst of horror and despair, knew her end was near. The silence of the night was broken only by the sound of her footsteps and the rustling of the simple clothes she now wore, stripped of any sign of her former royalty. They took her to the edge of a deep river, whose dark waters reflected the distant stars in the sky. There, they tied heavy stones to her feet. Maria, with a heart weighed down by pain, looked up to the sky, perhaps asking for clemency, perhaps asking for strength. She knew that the life she carried inside her would never see the light of day. Without a word, the guards threw her into the river. The waters enveloped her like a cold, silent embrace, and Maria, powerless, sank, taking with her the child who would never be born. It was the end of a queen, a mother, a woman who had fought against all adversities with a strength that few could understand. But the river, which swallowed her in its dark embrace, did not remain silent for long. 7 days after that cruel act, something extraordinary began to happen. On the banks where Maria was sacrificed, flowers began to bloom, in a beauty and color never seen before. Fish, which had been scarce in that part of the river, now swam in abundance, as if Maria's very life had nourished those waters. Maria's young beloved, driven by a premonition he could not ignore, decided to dive into the river's depths in search of answers. And there, in the depths, he found Maria's body, not as he had imagined, but transformed. The rags she wore at the moment of her death had turned into royal garments, adorned with jewels that shone as if the river itself had recognized her nobility. Her body was perfectly preserved, as if nature wanted to return the dignity that men had tried to steal from her. With a broken heart but determined to honor the love of his life, the young man rescued Maria's body. A ceremony worthy of a queen was held, with the entire populace coming to pay their respects. Maria's ashes were scattered to the wind, so that her essence could touch everyone who had been moved by her kindness in life. Meanwhile, the king, upon learning what had happened, descended into madness. Visions of Maria tormented him night after night, and his mind, already fragile, began to unravel. The once prosperous kingdom started to wither under the weight of his guilt and despair. There was no more salvation for him. And so, the reign of a man consumed by rage and pride came to an end, while the legacy of Maria Mulambo, of love, sacrifice, and kindness, endured for generations. The young widower, who had carried the love for Maria in his heart for so long, could not rest. Since the tragic disappearance of his beloved, a premonition unsettled him, something he could not ignore. In his solitary nights, visions of Maria came to him, like a soft whisper carried by the wind, calling him to the river's banks where everything had happened. He knew, deep in his soul, that something still needed to be done, something that connected him to the woman he loved so much, even after death. Guided by this invisible force, he returned to the river, to the exact spot where Maria was cruelly sacrificed. The banks, once desolate, now bloomed with uncommon beauty. Flowers, never seen before, blossomed, coloring the landscape in shades of red, yellow, and white. It was as if nature itself wanted to honor Maria's memory, as if the love and kindness she distributed in life had found a way to manifest in the natural world. With a heart full of hope and sorrow, the widower decided to dive into the deep waters. He knew that what he sought was not something worldly, but spiritual. He plunged, facing the darkness of the depths, until his eyes, accustomed to the dark, saw something that left him breathless. Maria's body, perfectly preserved, lay there as if time and the waters had not touched her form. The simple rags she wore on the night of her death had transformed into majestic robes, adorned with bright jewels that shimmered in the depths, as if the river recognized her true royalty. It was a breathtaking vision. The woman who, in life, had abandoned the luxuries and opulence of the court, was now returned to her noble spirit. Nature, in its deep silence, had honored what men had tried to destroy. Every detail of her appearance radiated the dignity she had always possessed, but that the physical world had tried to steal. For the widower, that moment was a revelation. He realized that, even in death, Maria's spirit remained strong, intact, immortal. With silent reverence, he rescued his beloved's body. A ceremony was organized, and all the people Maria had helped in life came to pay their respects. She, who had been a queen of heart, was cremated with the dignity of a true sovereign. Her ashes were released into the wind, spreading throughout the kingdom, touching every corner where her presence had brought love and comfort. It was as if, even in death, Maria continued to reach those who needed her compassion most. The legacy of Maria Mulambo transcended her own life. She was not just a woman of the people or a queen who had suffered at the hands of a cruel king. She became a symbol of unconditional love, sacrifice, and protection. Her name began to be invoked by those seeking comfort in times of adversity, and her spirit, freed from the constraints of the physical world, became a constant presence in the villages she used to visit. They said that, on the darkest nights, it was possible to feel a soft breeze, carrying the fragrance of the flowers that bloomed where her body had rested. It was a sign that Maria was near, watching over the needy, protecting the oppressed. Her example of kindness and resilience spread, not only as a legend but as a spiritual truth that continues to inspire generations. Even today, Maria Mulambo is revered as an entity representing love for others, sacrifice for those in need, and the strength of the human spirit that, even in the face of the worst adversities, does not allow itself to be corrupted. Her name is a call to empathy, charity, and faith in transformation. And it is with this legacy in mind that I thank you, who made it this far, following this story to the end. What Maria Mulambo teaches us goes far beyond a tragic story. It is a reminder that, in each of us, there is the capacity to make a difference, to be a source of light for those who live in darkness. If you enjoyed this story and want to continue following other forbidden stories of the Orixas, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos, and leave your comment below, letting us know what you thought of this journey. We want to hear your opinion. Your participation is essential to keep this chain of spirituality and love alive, just as Maria Mulambo did during her life and continues to do in spirit. Get ready for more impactful and inspiring stories we will bring to you. See you next time.